Hey guys, and welcome to the Random Watch Dude channel. Thanks for joining me for this video. Today I want to talk to you about my happy place in the watch collecting hobby. As you know, I've only had this channel for just over 3 months now. Started in November, got to where are we now, the middle of February. And I've basically set this channel up to talk to you about my kind of watch collecting journey. I've been collecting watches and into the watch hobby generally, you know, pretty in deep, if I'm honest with you, for about nearly 10 years now. And I've been through a variety of different phases in the watch collecting hobby, starting off with, you know, just your basic, you know, $250 Seiko SKX. And, you know, before I knew it, guys, you know, I was into the Omegas and the Tudors, and then I got my first Rolex. And then I got really hooked on the Rolex bandwagon for a little while. Came off of that every now and then, and you know, bought another Omega and another Tudor, and I also got back into Seiko. I've come right back down the ladder again, and started to, you know, get back into Seiko and bought a few cheap Seiko divers watches, and then I've worked my way back up the ladder and got back into Rolex. So been a real, for most of you, you'll be familiar with this, of course, you know, the roller coaster ride that you go on as a watch collector, and just being, you know, into the watch hobby generally. But I've kind of hit a new point, I guess, in the hobby, guys. You know, a new phase, a phase that I've just been through is ending now, and I'm just starting a new one. And actually a really appropriate wristwatch check today is my lovely little Tag Heuer 1000 here. So this is a vintage, really, I suppose you could say, a vintage Tag Heuer quartz. I'll just get a bit closer for you there. This is a little quartz watch. It's a 37mm diameter case. It's got an ETA high torque, high accuracy quartz movement in it. I just had this serviced actually, and of course a service for a quartz watch doesn't cost anything like what it would do for an auto. Service on this it basically means new battery, all new seals, you know, glass seal, crown seals, and of course the, you know, the case back seal, and a bit of a clean up. You know, they clean the contacts and just give it a general blowout. What I had noticed with this one actually when I bought it quite recently was that the underside of the crystal was a little bit cloudy, and I gather that happens when the battery is getting quite old. And sometimes when the battery gets quite old, apparently it gives off a gas, and it leaves like a cloudiness on the underside of the crystal. So I had that, and so that was one of the reasons I was quite keen to get this serviced, and that's all been cleaned up. So I got all that done, you know, knew everything basically that needed doing on this watch for 200 New Zealand dollars, which is about 100 quid. And before you say that's rather a lot of money just for a battery change and some new seals, well, guys, I mean, how much does it cost, you know, to get an automatic watch service these days? I've just put my Omega 2254 4.5 in, and that's got the old Omega 1120 movement in it, so it's pre-coaxial, and that's still costing me what's that, 1,300 New Zealand dollars just to get a service. And I'm paying an extra 400 New Zealand dollars to get a new sapphire crystal put on that, because it's got a couple of little scratches on it. So definitely cheaper to be into quartz, guys. There's no question of that. But this watch, it really is a reminder and very poignant reason for why I wanted to make this video. And I'm just talking to you about a new phase that I'm going into in my collection. And before you start accusing me of being fickle and changing my mind and going off in different directions, and, well, you said this in that video and now you're doing that, yeah, that's the way this hobby works, guys, isn't it? You know, I know this is not just me. I reserve the right to be very fickle, and I'll be quite honest and open about that. I reserve the right to be fickle because I'm a watch collector, and I change my mind frequently about what I'm doing and where I'm going and how I'm doing it. That's just part of being in the watch collecting hobby, isn't it, guys? You're fickle. So I'm not like that in any other aspect of my life. I'm just the perfect gentleman in every other aspect of my life. You know, my life is perfect, but I'm a very fickle and difficult to read person when it comes to collecting watches, guys. So the next stage of my watch collecting journey, the happy place that I'm getting into now, is the secondary market. And in particular, guys, I'm going to get into the secondary market for vintage and neo-vintage watches. The reason I'm going there is kind of, I've got 5 reasons actually. I've got 5 key reasons why I'm getting into the vintage and neo-vintage watch phase in my watch collecting journey. But before I just go into those 5 key reasons, I just want to talk about where I'm coming from For those of you who haven't seen some of my recent videos, I must admit I've been a bit of a Rolex fanboy for about the last 3 or 4 years. I've certainly been an Omega fanboy as well, although I haven't invested so much of my cash into Omega. I've certainly been a fan of the watches they make, and I do have a couple of neo vintage Omegas right now in a Planet Ocean and a Seamaster. Made videos on those in the past, but certainly coming from a place of being an Omega, a Rolex fanboy and investing a lot of money in Rolex. And I made a video quite recently, and you know, and I've been thinking about it recently as well, guys. And I did say it in the last video. I think I'm pretty much done with Rolex now. I think I've pretty much sort of gone through that whole phase with Rolex where I kind of get it. I still love Rolex watches, by the way, and I'm certainly not losing interest in the product itself, but I'm kind of starting to think now, well, okay, I've invested enough of my cash and my time and my mental energy into Rolex. I don't really want to get into the rabbit hole, which is vintage Rolex, by the way. I just think that's too deep a rabbit hole for me to go down. So yeah, I've just got to a stage now. A couple of events have happened recently in my life and in the watch world for me generally, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's a sign for me to move on to the next phase. So, and before I talk about that, the 5 reasons why I'm getting into vintage and neo vintage. You know, what's happened recently that's made me sort of change you know, my tack a little bit, and I think to a degree, you know, on the Rolex side of things, I think, you know, I don't know if boredom's too strong a word, but I've just got to the stage with Rolex where I think I've just kind of seen it. I've seen what I want to see. I've watched every single video I think that there is to watch in terms of, you know, half decent review of a Rolex. I've watched them all. You know, they don't make an awful lot of variety in terms of their movements, and I think once you've owned 2 or 3 Rolex and you've been through that process with the ADs and all that, and I've had all that, good and bad, of course. You know, you get to a stage with Rolex, I think, and I'm there now where it's like, well, yeah, okay, there's nothing new for me here. There's nothing to see here. Move along is kind of how I feel now with Rolex. So it's kind of led me into, I guess, what is a significantly larger rabbit hole, which is the secondary market, because the secondary market, of course, is, you know, 30, 40, 50 years worth of watches, not just watches that are being released now kind of thing, not just new models. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the 5 reasons why I'm going back away from Rolex and Omega, and essentially I guess I could broaden that spectrum and say I'm going away from buying retail. I'm going away from buying new watches from dealers. So from now on, for the next, you know, however long, for as long as I'm enjoying it, really, I guess, I will be buying second-hand watches, essentially. So 5 reasons. Reason number 1 is design. So I like the designs on the whole that are out there now. I'm not crazy about some of Omega's designs. I'm not crazy about the Omega Seamaster. I'm not crazy about the Planet Ocean, for example. I really don't like an awful lot of what TAG are putting out at the moment in terms of their dive watches, but I do like their dress watches. I don't like the designs of watches where the case is too thick. And I think that's why I quite like the vintage and neo vintage designs, guys, is because the cases and the dimensions generally aren't too large. I don't know quite why Omega have gone for such thick, large watches as they have over the last few years. I think a lot of it is to accommodate the bigger movements and the extra technology that they're putting into their movements, but and also the sapphire casebacks, of course, which I've never been crazy about sapphire casebacks. And I don't think I ever will be. So design is the first reason. I just much prefer the design of some of the older generation watches that are out there. The second one is cost. It goes without saying, really, doesn't it? Cost. I mean, money is just a huge contributory factor in a lot of our decision making. And when it comes to cost, guys, you know, particularly the last couple of years, the retail prices for new watches now, I mean, they're just getting a little bit silly, aren't they, really? Let's be honest. You know, I know, I think Archie Luxury said, and it's a commonly, you know, re-plagiarised phrase, Archie Luxury once said, it's got to hurt. you know, if you're buying a luxury watch, it's got to hurt. And I agree with that. It does. If you're buying you know, the luxury watch, you know, that's going to make you happy, then yeah, it's got to hurt financially. But when you're a watch collector and you want to buy, you know, let's say you want to buy 3 or 4 new watches every year, or even 1 or 2 a year, you can't, you know, that's not acceptable anymore to say it's got to hurt. No, it shouldn't hurt, actually. If you're a watch collector, it shouldn't hurt. And I think with the prices of retail, even for, you know, fairly standard models, and I'm not just talking about the big 3, and of course, you know, there's Rolex, Omega, Tudor, they're the big 3, they're the big clickbait brands on YouTube, of course. I'm talking about all the other brands as well, like IWC, Panerai, who else is there? You've got Tag Heuer, Grand Seiko, all of those guys. They've all jacked their prices up, and it's all just getting a bit silly now. So look, if you're just in the market to buy one luxury watch, then maybe you could argue that it's still worth it because it's going to hurt. So there's your Archie luxury justification. It's going to hurt, but as a watch collector, no, I'm sorry, it can't keep hurting every time I buy a new watch. So cost is another reason, guys, why I'm starting to look now more closely at the secondary market, and particularly vintage and neo-vintage. Reason number 3, in one word, control. What do I mean by control? Control in that I don't have to pander to anybody. I don't have to pander to authorised dealers. I don't have to pander to salespeople. I'm in control. When I'm buying a secondary watch, and you know, the 99% of the watches I buy, guys, if they're used, I buy them privately from the person who's owned that watch. So it's a much more enjoyable experience, guys. I promise you that. If you haven't done it already, it's a much more enjoyable experience, and I'm quite enjoying the prospect of just having control back, you know, of that whole buying process, you know, which particularly in the last couple of years, let's say the last 3 or 4 years, you've kind of lost control a lot of the time, haven't you? Particularly when it comes to buying watches off of the big brands where availability is very difficult. So that's reason number 3. Reason number 4, and it does lead on nicely actually from reason number 3, is fun. I want to have fun, you know. I'll be honest, sometimes, you know, collecting watches is not fun. It's not been fun for me anymore, for various reasons. I could make a whole video about why it's not been fun sometimes, but I think you all know why sometimes it's not fun. And a lot of it is of course, self-inflicted pain that you put yourself through as a watch enthusiast. But I want to get the fun back into the process, which is, and in terms of fun, what I'm talking about here is research. I really enjoy researching the history of watches. I really enjoy researching the information that's online, for example, about all the different models. I really enjoy talking to other people that might own a watch that I'm looking at, you know, and getting their feedback. I'm also talking in terms of the negotiating process when you're buying a watch. It's a lot more enjoyable. I do enjoy, you know, negotiating anything really. It's just fun to have that conversation with somebody where you can sort of reach a deal together. I don't enjoy the process of negotiating with for a new watch these days because there is no negotiation. So I'm looking forward to having fun, you know, getting that control back as well, and in negotiation process, and enjoying that. And I've actually met some really cool people that I still am in contact with now, that I've bought a watch from or that I've sold a watch to in the past. So there's a social aspect as well. When you get into the secondary market, there's a social aspect, because if you're just always buying new watches, you know, your social circle revolves around the people that just want to sell you a watch. In other words, you know, the retailers. Whereas, you know, when you're actually into the secondary market, you get to meet and have fun with like-minded people and trade with them, and so just bring a bit of fun back to the hobby as well, which I'm looking forward to. And just finally, guys, number 5 is just the hype. You know, when you're buying secondary market, when you're buying vintage and neo-vintage in particular, there's no hype around these watches. You know, the hype, if there ever was any hype, you know, for a 2008 Seamaster 2254.5, if there ever was any hype around that watch, it was back in 2008, you know, when it was discontinued, let's say. And you know, and since then it's just been sat there, you know, trading away in the background. No one's got too excited about it. It's always been a bit of a cult watch, that particular watch in particular, but it's never been a hype watch. I don't know that there are any hype used watches out there apart from the discontinued Rolex, for example. They're still hype watches, aren't they, like a Hulk. Yeah, the no hype. You know, being interested in watches and trying to get my hands on watches that aren't actually surrounded by hype is another reason why I'm really quite excited about this next phase. So there are 5 reasons, guys. Design, cost, control, having fun, and no hype. That's the 5 reasons why I'm moving on into my happy place of trading and buying watches and collecting watches in the secondary used market for vintage and neo-vintage. And just lastly, guys, I'm not going to rip into this like now, next week even. I'm going to take a little break from acquiring more watches. I'm not taking a break from thinking about watches because I don't think that's possible for me. I'm not going to take a break from enjoying my watches that I already have, but I am going to take a break for a little while now in terms of acquisition. I'm not going to buy anything. Now this is my plan, of course, and as I said at the start of this video, I reserve the right to change my mind at any moment and be very fickle. But right now, as of today, as of making this video, my intention is to take a little break, take a breather, start doing my research and start thinking about what types of watches I want to really focus on. And I will make videos on that, by the way. I'm going to share this process with you guys. I'm going to share, you know, maybe once a week a new video on what I'm thinking of doing and where I'm thinking of going, where I'm looking and why. And talk to you maybe about pricing and my thoughts on the pricing and what I might want to do and what my budget is and things like that. So just share that journey with you guys. This channel is really just an enthusiast's video blogging channel, yeah, that's kind of what I want to focus on for the next foreseeable future in my watch journey. So if that's of interest, please do stick around and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. Cheers, bye.